Hey guys, in this video I'm going to be listing off some of the most overrated versions of bodybuilders, at least in my opinion. Now, as you all know, my opinion is the objective truth and can't be contested, so please don't leave any comments down below telling me otherwise. Seriously though, I'm certain there are plenty of quote-unquote overrated bodybuilders out there that I didn't put into this video, so do shout some out in the comments down below. By overrated, I'm talking about particular versions of competitors that are considered better than they actually are. Don't get it twisted though, I'm only talking about specific versions of these guys, meaning that I don't necessarily think all of them are overrated in their entirety. Now, before we do dive into this video, I want to give a quick shout out to my partner, Old School Labs. If you guys are interested in high quality supplements, such as Replica GH, which I just got and I think it's amazing, or numerous other pre-workouts and things like that, you can use my code JakeUltimate or check out the link in the description below. With that all being said though, if you guys enjoy these videos, a like and sub would be awesome, and without any further ado, let's get into this video. Alright, starting off this video pretty lightly, we've got arguably the most overrated physique in recent times, Tito Chupin's 2023 Olympia version, which might shock some of you, but let me explain. Look, by no means was Hadi bad at this show, and I fully believe he brought a respectable look. He looked great, had a balanced and refined physique, and showcased impressive condition. Furthermore, when it comes to his physique alone, I don't think that it's necessarily overrated. He's one of the best in the current era, no doubt. However, in this case, what I mean by overrated is more about the extreme, almost cult-like level of admiration that some of his fans pour into the comment sections of various posts all around the internet. After his 2022 Olympia win, and to a certain extent after his 2024 Arnold Classic victory, I've seen a lot of Hadi fans go absolutely crazy in support of him. And you know, that's obviously fair, and his fans were definitely quick to label him as the best in the world, which is, you know, of course right as he won those two shows, but in some cases they claim that he's even better than some of the all-time legends like Ronnie Coleman. Additionally, after his 2022 Olympia win, I remember seeing comment sections and hearing conversations where people were saying things like Hadi's conditioning is better than Ronnie's, or Hadi's physique is the perfect balance of size and aesthetics. While I don't want to dismiss the hard work and improvements Hadi has made over the years, we've got to look at things objectively. I mean, come on, guys. The reality is no version of Hadi, no matter how well conditioned or aesthetically pleasing, stands up to the sheer dominance of Ronnie Coleman or a guy like Phil Heath, Jay Cutler, whatever, at his best. Now, don't get me wrong, I respect what Hadi has done for the sport, and he's definitely a top-tier competitor in today's scene. But this idea of Hadi being somehow better than Ronnie Coleman, of all competitors, I guess, is a bit of a stretch. This is why I just think he's pretty overrated, and this comment is one of many that I see from Hadi fans, and these die-hard Hadi fans are what makes me feel as though Hadi is definitely an overrated competitor today. Up next is Jay Cutler's 2006 Olympia-winning, Ronnie-dethroning physique. Now, if the last guy didn't turn some heads, this one certainly will. The reason I think Jay in 2006 was overrated is simply due to the fact that Ronnie could have won the show as well. Many others, including myself, have done recaps and analyses on the 2006 Olympia, and in those videos I'd say that more often than not, Ronnie comes out on top. Sure, Ronnie was melting and started showing significant signs of wear and tear, but he still outmassed Jay in some shots and came back strong for the finals. Jay was by no means bad at this show, don't think that I'm saying otherwise, however, he wasn't perfect either. His waist was pretty wide, which was to be expected considering that he was at his all-time heaviest in '06, and his conditioning from behind wasn't the most impressive because of it. Personally, it's the idea of Jay narrowly beating Ronnie at this show, combined with the sheer weight of defeating the greatest bodybuilder ever, that makes this version of Jay slightly overrated. His physique wasn't overly impressive, yet the fact that this version of him ended Ronnie's reign is what makes me feel that this win was more monumental than it actually was. As a fan of bodybuilding, I can attest that Jay's win holds so much more aura than his actual physique did at the show, and carefully analyzing each pose reveals that it could have gone either way, and probably should have gone to Ronnie. Here's one that I'm sure some of you guys are going to get upset with, but I genuinely do think that Mike Mentzer is one of the most overrated competitors, at least at the 1980 Mr. Olympia. One of the things that I hear the most in my comments, as well as just scrolling through others, is how did he not win the 1980 Mr. Olympia? He was the first competitor to get a perfect score. To be fair, the old judging system is pretty hard for me to understand too, with all the classes and different scoring methods compared to today, but simply hearing that Mike just got a perfect 300 makes it seem as though he should be the best in the world by default at the time, right? Well, that's the score that he got at the 1978 Mr. Universe, meaning he scored a perfect score compared to his competitors. I don't really see how you can carry over a score from 2 years prior to the 1980 Mr. Olympia, but some people use it as an argument, which is the first reason as to why I think Mike's 1980 version is overrated. The second reason is purely based on his physique at the show. First off, his posing wasn't really the best, as his midsection control and general flow were not top tier. Second, he simply wasn't as good as he looked in 78 or 79, as were most of the competitors in 1980, with many being slightly or super off. From my personal view, I do like Mike's physique, and I think in certain poses, like the crucifix or some mantis variations, he looks like he could have captured the title. That said, in the mandatories, he had his flaws, and that reflected in a 5th place finish. That placing is something that can be debated in the future. However, overall, I do think he was pretty overrated in 1980. Next is Arnold Schwarzenegger's 1975 Olympia winning version, which I think is overrated for numerous reasons. To get this out of the way, yes, I do think that his 1975 physique was still very impressive and definitely deserved to win, and I do have it up there with my personal favorite versions of him. Arnold's conditioning was sharp, his proportions were still massive, and his classic lines made him stand out on that stage. However, despite all that, he still had, some sort of flaws, and this has got to be his most overrated version by far. The reason why this version of Arnold is so highly thought of is mainly due to its portrayal in the Pumping Iron docudrama. This film is perhaps the most famous piece of documented bodybuilding material out there, and naturally that makes Arnold's 1975 version forever etched in history. That said, let's not forget about the popularity and legacy, and how that can sometimes cloud our judgment when analyzing a physique in isolation. Pumping Iron undoubtedly cemented Arnold's status as a bodybuilding icon, but it also created a mythic aura, in my opinion, around his 1975 physique that doesn't necessarily reflect the reality of how he stacked up against the competition or against his other versions in the past. One of the biggest issues with 1975 Arnold's physique is the noticeable downsizing compared to his earlier years. While his upper body still looked phenomenal, his lower body, particularly the quads, took a significant hit. His outer quads lacked the fullness and detail that they had in 1974, which was a much more complete package. In fact, Arnold's legs in 1975 looked relatively small compared to his upper body, creating a somewhat imbalanced appearance. The upper body still had that trademark size, vascularity, and condition that made him stand out, but the overall symmetry was compromised by the lack of lower body development. It was almost like Arnold's lower body was playing catch-up to the sheer size and fullness of his upper, a trend that would only worsen in his 1980 comeback. Now, in 1975, it was almost as if he was a shell of his former self, comparing it to 1974 at least, in terms of raw mass and fullness, but with his legendary charisma and stage presence, he was definitely able to make up for it. And while that's not to take anything away from his win, he deserved it based on his performance, in my opinion. The exaggerated praise for this particular version doesn't always align with the true nature of his physique on that given day. So in the grand scheme of things, while Arnold's 1975 physique remains a classic, very iconic version, it's often overrated because of its widespread fame from Pumping Iron and the apparent nostalgia surrounding it. When comparing Arnold's 1975 version to his more muscular and almost more balanced physiques in other years, it's easy to see why it might be viewed through rose-colored glasses of sorts, especially when considering the gaps in his lower body development and the lack of overall size in comparison to other peak years. Kevin Levrone's 2002 Olympia version comes to my mind as one of the most overrated versions of a bodybuilder ever. The amount of edits and fan-made highlights of this particular physique is just astounding. Many people still believe that Kevin should have won the 2002 Olympia, and while it's true that Ronnie Coleman wasn't at his best that year, Kevin's second place finish was more of a gift than an actual placing, based on his physique at least. Now, maybe calling it a gift is a little harsh, but when you really break it down, it's clear that Kevin's physique didn't warrant such a high placing. Kevin from the waist up was without a doubt the classic Maryland muscle machine. His upper body had it all: insane fullness in the chest, massive arms, strided delts, and deep lines that showcased muscle maturity like few others had. It's the kind of muscle density and fullness that fans of Levrone still hold in high regard. His upper body was, for all intents and purposes, a masterclass in bodybuilding aesthetics and mass. However, things drastically changed when you looked at his lower body. It was clear that his legs, especially his quads, were downsized compared to his peak years, and there was no denying it. His quad sweep was far less impressive than what we saw in earlier seasons of his, and compared to the likes of Ronnie and other top competitors, his legs looked almost flat. This discrepancy between the upper and lower body was very glaring, and it severely hurt his overall symmetry and balance, which are crucial in this sport, especially at the Olympia level. From behind, Kevin's glutes and hamstrings were also noticeably lacking. Where Ronnie's glutes were incredibly dense and separated, Kevin's looked somewhat soft and underdeveloped in comparison. His hamstrings lacked the deep cuts and full, thick appearance that you would expect from a top Olympia competitor, or even just Kevin in the past, especially in a year where the judges were scrutinizing every detail, looking for a pretty good complete package of mass, detail, and condition. Kevin just didn't bring that required fullness and separation in his lower body to seriously contend with the other top guys, obviously Ronnie included, despite Ronnie being slightly off. Now, similar to Tito Chupin's situation, Kevin's fanbase has often made this version of him seem far more legendary than it really was. Many Kevin Levrone fans have long argued that he should have at least won one Olympia, and sure, 2002 is probably the closest shot given that Ronnie was nowhere near his best, but even with Ronnie's shortcomings that year, Kevin's physique was still lacking key aspects that would have made him a true contender for the title. Ultimately, these reasons are why I believe that Kevin's '02 Olympia version is super overrated. However, let me know your thoughts on whether you guys agree or not. I'm almost 100% positive that this one's going to get someone upset, as I have Marcus Rule's 2002 Night of Champions physique on the list. Now, don't get me wrong, Marcus was an absolute freak of nature when it came to sheer mass, and his ability to turn any pose into the most muscular was just a very legendary thing to do. However, the '02 Night of Champions version of Marcus has received so much hype that it's become almost mythic in status, and that's where the overhyped factor comes into play. This physique in particular is seen as the holy grail for fans of absolute freak mass monsters, and many people regard it as his best. Some even consider it to be the best bodybuilding physique ever. Yes, I have seen people comment that Marcus's '02 Night of Champions physique is unbeatable, and honestly, when you watch that grainy, stretched resolution, singular video footage of his posing routine, it's pretty easy to see why some of you would believe that. In that video, Marcus looks almost unreal. I mean, he looks impossibly dense, grainy, and incredibly dry. His lines are carved straight out of every possible place that you could possibly carve out a muscle, and his mass is nearly incomprehensible. However, when you compare this grainy video footage to some of the rare pictures from the actual show, you start to see a very big difference. While the video footage shows what looks like an inhuman, almost mythical creature of a bodybuilder, the still photos reveal something different. A pretty great version of Marcus, no doubt, but not an unbeatable one. The angle, lighting, and overall quality of the video footage plays a huge role in exaggerating his physique. The high exposure and stretched resolution add layers to his already impressive mass, which makes him appear even more massive and shredded than he truly was. Additionally, thinking about his condition in the video, Marcus looks incredibly dry and shredded, but when you take a closer look at the pictures from the actual event, you can see that his conditioning wasn't as sharp as the video footage might suggest. There were still some areas, particularly his glutes and hamstrings, where the level of definition wasn't up to the standard you'd expect from top guys at the highest level. His legs, while massive, lacked the deep cuts and separation that would have put him on the same level as someone like Ronnie Coleman or Dorian Yates. In terms of aesthetics and overall balance, he was nowhere near as refined as those legends. Overall, what makes this physique so overrated is mostly the distorted perception created by that video footage, of course. When you compare to other mass monsters and consider the other factors like condition and balance, it becomes clear that Marcus's '02 physique wasn't as unbeatable as some may claim. It's an incredible display of mass, no doubt, but the hype surrounding it, mostly fueled by that iconic video footage, tends to overshadow the reality that this version of Marcus just wasn't the complete package necessary to challenge the best at the highest level. The last competitor I have on this list is Flex Wheeler, who has many arguably overrated showings in his career. However, I chose his 1999 British Grand Prix package because I think there are a few key factors that led him to being overrated here. Now, don't get me wrong, Flex looked absolutely godlike at this show. He brought ultra full muscle bellies, crazy good proportions, limbs that seemed suspiciously bursting full, and what appeared to be top-notch condition. On the surface, his physique was nearly flawless, and he was only narrowly beaten out by the far more impressive and more massive, and just overall better, I guess, Ronnie Coleman. That said, here's where the real overratedness comes into play: the immaculate stage display and lighting, which completely masked Flex's flaws and highlighted his strong points. That lighting, which made Flex's physique look like something out of a superhero comic, played a huge role in the perception of his physique. His weaker hamstring and glute condition, which was arguably the worst out of him, Kevin, and Ronnie that day, were hidden by the dark shadows, and the few lines that he did have were emphasized and further carved out in the darkness. Without the perfect lighting, his weak spots would have been much more apparent, and it's hard to deny that. But because of how good the lighting was set up, Flex's weaknesses in his lower body were effectively concealed, or at least masked to a certain extent, leaving fans and judges to focus on his upper body and his frontal side more so, for that symmetry and balance that he had. Now, here's where the real exaggeration happened. If the lighting helped hide Flex's weaknesses that much, imagine what it did to his strong points. It absolutely amplified them. His muscle bellies appeared fuller than they actually were, his proportions seemed even more perfect, and his separation looked far sharper. The lighting made his limbs pop against the black background, creating an illusion of fullness and muscular density that might have not been as pronounced in reality. His stellar frontal separation, for example, just jumped out at you in the way the lights hit his body, but it's possible that without that exact lighting, his physique wouldn't have looked quite as seamless. The angles and shadows definitely helped exaggerate his lines, to the point where it became easy to forget that some areas, especially those glutes and hamstrings, didn't have the same level of conditioning that we are usually going to expect from a top competitor. Another factor that contributes to why this version of Flex is overrated in my opinion is the video footage that accompanies the pictures. What you've been seeing on screen is that video footage, and while the pictures are incredibly flattering still, highlighting his proportions and muscularity in the best possible light, the video footage took it to another level. We all know how the video footage can sometimes help make a competitor look more impressive than they truly are, and in Flex's case, it added an additional layer of hype. The grainy, low-quality video made his physique look larger than life, almost surreal, when viewed from certain angles. The movement in the video also helped to highlight his muscle flow and fullness in a way that still photos simply couldn't, and while it definitely showcased his aesthetic appeal, it also exaggerates his physique in ways that weren't as apparent in person or in clearer photos. What's even crazier is that the only competitor who really embodied that wow factor was Ronnie Coleman at this show. I guess that's really no surprise there. Ronnie's sheer size, condition, and muscle maturity were something else entirely, but the other competitors, including Flex, were undeniably helped by that grainy video footage, which played a massive role in how we remember this version of Flex today. In reality, his 1999 British Grand Prix version was realistically not much better, if at all, compared to his 1998 or 1999 Olympia versions. These versions were all phenomenal. However, I feel as though we look at the 1999 British Grand Prix with a more legendary lens compared to the 98 or 99 Olympias, simply due to the help of that perfect lighting. And without the help of that lighting and the grainy video footage as well, this video of Flex would have been more in line with his other top showings, impressive but not as mind-blowing as many fans believe. It's easy to get caught up in the narrative of the lighting and video footage, but when you really break down the physique without those factors, you start to see where Flex's true weaknesses are on stage, and why in the context of the all-time greats, this version falls a little bit short, at least in my opinion. Anyways guys, those are all the competitors that I decided to put into this video. I was kind of in the mood to make a controversial video that was fun and still left room for debate and other opinions, so please leave your opinions and overrated competitors down below, as I would love to hear them. With that all being said, I hope you all enjoyed the video, and I'll see you all in the next one. Thanks for watching.